Greetings. I'm Kimberly HayDay,
And I'm Amanda Day,
and you are listening to Fundraising HayDay, bless your heart,
where we cover the how-tos of grants and fundraising.
and how we can all do a better job of changing the world through philanthropy, y'all.
And remember, if you're a Patreon subscriber, you can get these episodes before anybody else. So, speaking of Patreon, we first of all want to say thank you for listening to the podcast in any way, shape, or form that you listen. We appreciate you. But if you really just can't get enough of that HayDay stuff, we really do encourage you to join our Patreon because not only do you get episodes early, but you get all kinds of other goodies too. We have 4 tiers with monthly subscriptions ranging anywhere from $5 a month to $30 a month. If you love what you're hearing, it's a great way to support our work. Plus, you get some fabulous bonus content. Um, you get these episodes 48 hours early. We have a monthly book club. We have a monthly mistakes were made episode where Kimberly and I
Oh,
each take a turn sitting in the hot seat talking about, hey, here's this thing I did. And it may be as minuscule as, well, it's not minuscule, but something from like I missed a deadline and here's how to, oh my gosh, I had to rethink my whole thinking of how I operated because of X, Y, and Z, right? So it runs the gamut. And there's lots of other goodies at all kinds of different levels. Also, if you want to check out the second tier, which is the FHD Friends and Such level, you can try it for free for 7 days. So that's a great way to kind of dip your toe in, see if you like the bonus content. If you do, great. All you have to do is visit our Patreon. It's at patreon.com/fundraising heyday. So check out and see what it is you're missing.
and the reason why we started Patreon and why we're asking you to do this, if this is something you're willing and able to do, is because it helps keep us in the podcasting business, if you will. We are so grateful for our sponsors over the years. Their generous support covers production costs, right? Like hosting, recording, sound engineer, all these good things that go into putting a podcast out. But what it doesn't do is pay us for our time. And by our time, I mean planning all the podcast episodes you've come to know and love, working with guests, creating scripts, interviewing, recording, all those different aspects of our own time and effort putting these things out. This is a true labor of love for us, and we are dedicated to keeping the podcast itself absolutely free. We've been doing this since 2018. And if this is something that you've been following since 2018 and you like it, why don't you consider becoming a Patreon? There also, you can join the community for free. But as Amanda mentioned, there's lots of different options at lots of different levels. And by the way, she makes a really mean playlist. I'm just saying. So keep that in mind.
There you go.
So listen, y'all, we are thrilled to have Kim Joyce and Associates returning as the season 8 sponsor for the first half of our season 8, which is crazy. CEO Kim Joyce and her team are celebrating 15 years of success with new service lines, all while expanding the depth and the breadth of their existing services. Kim is joining us to talk about trends in the field and more with a mini series that you'll hear at the beginning of each of the 12 episodes that Kim Joyce and Associates are sponsoring this season. So, y'all, if you're new to grants, it can be so easy to overlook the impact that relationships have on successful grant proposals because it's not all about the writing, right? Kim, can you give us an example or two of the tips and tricks you share with clients who sign up for your donor cultivation coaching?
Sure. And you're right, building relationships, especially with corporate and foundation grant funders, is extremely important. So we advise our clients on how to build relationships in proactive ways and think strategically and specific to their grant projects, programs, and what they are going to be doing within the next year. So I always say the best time to build a relationship is when you don't need something. So we advise our clients to reach out throughout the year and really build authentic and genuine relationships with the funders. These relationships shouldn't be transactional. Only when they receive the grant, it really should result in a mutual long-term partnership.
Wise words.
To find out more about Kim Joyce and Associates and their many incredible service lines, visit kimjoyceandassociates.com. They are a one-stop shop for all your grant-related needs. So many times when we talk about grants, there is just this persistent myth that as grant writers, all we do is we go sit in our corner or our cube and we write and we write and we write and we write. And while as grant professionals, we certainly do a lot of writing, there are so many things that have to be done beyond the writing. So grant writing is definitely such a misnomer, which is why Kimberly and I really do our best to talk about ourselves as grant professionals, not grant writers, because we run the whole gamut. And one of the things is that there's just a lot of steps that you have to take that's beyond just, tapping away at the keyboard. And one of the biggest things is grant readiness, which is our topic for today.
True. What we're going to start off by walking through the entire grant cycle and then talking about how to build the infrastructure that your organization needs to be grant ready. I'm so sorry. I just couldn't stop the sneeze. I was trying to look at the ring light and say pineapple, but it didn't work. I guess it's a sort of a folk tale. Anyway, sorry about that, Atlanta, pollen, April. It'll happen. So what we want to do is go through the grant cycle and just as a quick review, and then we're not spending a ton of time talking about all the attachments you need, and that is how you get ready to write a grant. Listen, they're important, and we're going to mention them. But beyond that is your organization ready? Do you have the infrastructure and planning and sustainability and all these other things in place to provide that kind of information to create a compelling and competitive grant proposal? So that's where we're coming from.
Yep. So, well, we want to break down kind of the typical cycle of the grant proposal. And this is important to understand because so often, whether you've gotten hired as a new grant professional or maybe you're coming into an organization that hasn't done a lot with grants, or maybe you have been in an organization forever and they told you yesterday, hey, congrats, you're in charge of grants, make it happen. And everybody just assumes day one, let's bring in that money, start writing those grants. But there's so much to do before you even get to that step. So this is kind of the typical cycle of how things flow. First of all, you need to have an understanding of your community and your organization. Like, what are your projects and programs? What are your needs? What is it you need funding for? And also, is that even something that you can find grants for? Because even though people think grant money just exists for everything, it doesn't. So having some time speaking with leadership in your organization, speaking with your board, speaking with program directors, doing a lot of communication and understanding what is the work that we do? Where are our gaps in funding? What needs to be funding on a continual basis? And understanding those sorts of things is what you need to start you off in the right direction. Because how do you know what grant to write if you're like, well, what am I writing for? What do we need? So understanding the need in your activities is job number one. Okay. And that can take some time, right? That's not something a conversation with one person is going to get you those answers to, especially if you're unfamiliar to an organization. Twice now, I have started working as a grant professional in an organization where, first of all, both times I was the very first full-time grant person on board. And I was in one place, I'd been there a year in another role. And another place, I was brand new to that organization. It took me a couple of months to really dive in and because I wanted to read, if you're a nonprofit, you've got all kinds of things like annual reports and strategic plans and things like that. I worked in local government. We had a 5-year park and rec plan, a 5-year transportation plan, an economic development plan. We had partners, we were partnering with the county on things and a community improvement district, and they all had plans and designs and things. So it took me quite a bit of time to get a handle on what is our vision for the future, and based on those plans, what is the infrastructure we said we needed? What is the programmatic things that need to start happening? So don't think like, oh my gosh, I've got to get this figured out in a week. It can take some time and that's okay. But you need to know that so you can communicate that well when your boss is like, well, why haven't the grants come in yet? It's because I need to get the lay of the land so we can be successful at that grant writing, right? So
Also,
that's go
can I
ahead.
bust in? Can I just
Bust
bust in
in.
like the Kool-Aid man that says, "Oh yeah"? I mean, just everybody. I'm so tired of welcome to the team. We're glad we contracted with you, or so glad we hired you.
Yeah.
Okay, so when is the first grant going to come in? I'm like, you know what? You know that is not how this business works.
Mm.
And if you don't know, let me tell you, it's like, really? If it was so easy and so timely, wouldn't you have already gotten that done?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things about grant readiness that Amanda mentioned that I want to just reiterate because it just drives me crazy is how grants work and what they don't fund. And you may be, if you've been grants for a long time, you're listening, you're like, oh my Lord, there Kimberly goes again. Bless her. She is just, and I'm like, yeah, I might be preaching a little bit, but take this as a message to you to think about educating up, no matter if you've been in the
Yes.
organization for a day or 10 years. There
Uh-huh.
might be a board member or a new ED. It's like, well, we just need we need more snacks, or I need an executive assistant. Because so can you write me a grant for that? It's like, no,
Yeah.
because most grants don't fund admin positions.
Mm.
Now, state and federal funding or state funding, because we're recording this in April 2025 and stuff has happened. Um, a lot of public funding could be used for program staff, right?
Yeah.
More firefighters, more teachers, more librarians, more nurses, doctors, social workers, community health workers, translators, what have you. Not a lot out there for someone who is making the day happen and sort of running the organization's timing and scheduling. That's a very important, these are very important positions, but they're not usually grant fundable. So part of getting an organization grant ready is making sure folks understand realistically, as Amanda said, what will grants fund and what they will not fund.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like there's a huge gap in understanding. And that's where when's that grant going to get in the door? Or another classic is, well, we just need grants to build a fund, for later. And it's like, I respect the need. I may not respect my fault. I may not. I may or may not. It depends because I'm funny about that. But that's not what grants do. However, that's what individual donations can do, or people who have, who you can talk to and explain the need. That's how endowments and scholarships are made at colleges and universities. So yes, you need to define your priorities, but once you define them, be really clear on how to help people understand what grants do and don't fund. So the Kool-Aid man is running off down the street now. That was it. Yeah, I just love
That
that
is a
old guy.
childhood flashback for real. And if you're too young to understand that reference, just move on.
Sorry.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. So, okay, so
Thank
step one is defining your needs. Step two is going to be researching your opportunities. And again, this is something that if you are new to grants, don't be disheartened if you are spending a lot of time doing research because before you can write the grant, you have to find the right grant. And
you.
it's not something that just like 10 minutes later, oh, I've got my list of perfect funders. Research can take a lot of time. In fact, right now I work part-time for Boyd Grants and all I do is research for their clients. That is all I do. I don't write any grants for them. They hire me part-time to research and find potential funders and dig in. And not only are we finding funders, but then we're also figuring out, okay, yes, they fund their region and their type of organization and those kinds of things, but what does it really look like? Because okay, yes, they fund charter schools, but do they tend to fund after school activities? Do they tend to fund equipment? Do they tend to fund? So you're really trying to drill down to make those perfect matches between funders and not just your organization as a whole, but your funding needs, right? And so you're gonna spend some time doing that. And it's something when you're new to grants at the very beginning, or you're new to an organization, you're probably going to be spending lots of time doing it. And it's a continual thing too. It's not like, oh, I'm going to research this month and I'm done for the next 5 years. Well, you may be able to research and find a lot to keep you busy for a while, but new needs are going to come up that you're going to have to research. There are changes in the funding landscape. There are just lots of things. So research really is an ongoing thing, but you definitely need to research before you get to step 3, which is that's when we start getting into the writing and of the grant and putting that together. So step 3 really is putting together your proposal, but it also includes making sure you're understanding the funder guidelines, right? So yes, you may have a small family foundation, and in their 990, their only instruction is send us a letter of intent. Okay, great. That's your instruction. But you also may be submitting a federal grant proposal that has a 82-page document. I was just reviewing one yesterday, trying to make some sense out of all the things that they wanted within that application, all the attachments they wanted, how long the narrative could be, what points do they want you to cover, when's the deadline, what's the portal, and are we registered in the portal, and are there any partnership requirements, and do we need MOUs, right? There's a lot of stuff found in those big RFPs or NOFOs or FOAs or whatever the acronym is for the funder guidelines, right? So you want to make sure that you understand that completely, that you don't miss out on an element that could then either disqualify you completely, or maybe chance having a lower score so you're not competitive and don't get funded. So that's step 3, reading all the guidelines, putting together that quality proposal. Step 4 then is submitting it on time. And by on time, we mean before the deadline, right? I was working on one yesterday that the deadline was 10 a.m. on, like, it was like due whatever date, but 10 a.m. Central Time was the deadline. And I was like, wow, that is early, even if you live in Central Time, to get it done at 10 a.m.
If you're on the West Coast, that's basically
That's
the night, the day before,
yeah.
straight up.
Right. So paying attention and making sure you're getting things in on time. And there's always someone that's, oh, Amanda, I have a funder that loves us and we're able to get some wiggle room. Okay, yes, it happens once in a blue moon, but that is not the norm. So don't rely on, I can always ask for an extension. No, I'd say 99.9% of the time you cannot. So let's get things in on time.
Also, just rethink it, Brenda, right? If you're like, oh, we can always get an extension. What if you just backed up and made it so that you don't have to always ask for an extension? I just a thought that I'm having. But anyway, please go ahead.
Yep. So.
Oh, and so after you submit it, right? If I have no idea who this person's name might be, I just picked the name Brenda, so don't at me. Or you can at me all you want, whatever. I'm here. After you turn in your grant on time, and then if you are getting an award, you're going to wait. You're going to wait for that grant. And then the fun starts. And by fun, I mean grant management. And maybe we have different ideas of the definition of the word fun, and I'm down with that. Maybe I'm being sarcastic, and I probably am. But really, seriously, the grant cycle then concludes with how the grant is managed, how including but not limited to turning your reports in on time, explaining and exploring and adjusting for any variances and all that good stuff. And then the cycle continues. So a whirlwind overview of grants.
And by cycle continue, a lot of times you're in the middle of a different phase of the cycle with every grant proposal, because it's not like this one is due March 1st and the next one's not due till April 1st. Chances are you could have 12 that are due March 1st. You could have some that are sprinkled throughout the entire month. So you may be in some different phases depending on what's going on. But that's, as a general rule, that's kind of how it goes. And again, important to make sure that your organization as a whole understands that. So people are not going, why haven't you written the grant? Why haven't you written a grant? Where's the money? It takes some time. Even if you write a grant, even if I write 12 grants this month, the money's not going to probably start flowing for a little bit, right? So okay, so whirlwind tour through grant cycle, but it's important to understand when we start talking grant readiness. We'll get to the essential documents to have on hand, but there is a bigger picture to consider, okay? So kind of like we talked with Step one, setting your program priorities and getting strategic with your search for grant opportunities, right? And Kimberly's kind of mentioned this already. For most nonprofits and local governments and hospital staff and everybody, we could use more admin staff, right? We need an accountant. We need an admin assistant who's handling registration for things. You know, our building is falling apart. I don't know how many times I've had a council member be like, we need a new city hall. I'm like, that's lovely. A grant's probably never going to pay for a new city hall. Federal grant isn't actually, because in 2 CFR Part 200, it talks about general government responsibilities, and having your own building is kind of one of them. Now, if our building was full of asbestos because it was old, or lead paint, could we get funding to repair, or maybe have to buy something up? Maybe. Again, everybody's like, but there's an exception. Sure. But as a general rule, we're not getting a new city hall, right? But that's important to understand, right? And the real reason is, as no matter what type of agency you are, grants, you should not be 100% grant funded, right? That's not a healthy, long-term sustainable plan, because as we know, in 2025, there are grants that have been around forever that are now don't exist or have changed so dramatically that it's not the fit for certain organizations. So if you are a nonprofit, you should have a well-rounded, robust diversification of your fundraising plan that includes things like individual donors, special events, email campaigns, monthly giving campaigns. All grants can certainly be a part of that role. If you're a local government, you've got things like taxes and fees for services. Again, hospitals, same things, right? So everybody should have other things. And Kimberly's laughing hysterically on my screen. What's going on?
We're in this together. We're just talking to each other. And I'm just saying, it sounded like you said, and everybody has Texas. And I'm like, not everybody has Texas. And everybody may not want Texas, because Texas is a big old state with a lot going on. So tax is
Yes, not
Texas.
Texas. It's the southern.
Texas.
I've
Also,
lived in
super
Georgia
quick,
too long.
it's true that federal and state funding won't fund buildings, like government buildings necessarily.
Yes.
And Amanda went through some exceptions. However, certainly if you're a nonprofit, there is funding available, but it's usually under the guise of a capital campaign, which is cool and groovy to talk about. Not the same as program support.
Yes.
Most foundations tend to support one or the other. So we've got you. We understand, but Amanda's point is super well taken for our local government brethren. It's going to be really hard to write a grant to get a new city hall. And by hard, I mean almost impossible.
Yeah. Well, and two, I will say these are things that, like, you don't know what you don't know. And so when I first started getting those things, I'd research and I wouldn't find anything. But just saying, hey, I can't find anything out there was not satisfying the leadership. They're like, well, then you need to look harder. Well, now I understand. I know.
Something you can do. I've got something
I
you
know.
can do.
But this is why anytime we can pepper in examples and stories and things like this, so you're like, oh, okay, it's not just me, because I can point to other people and other experts and other things, which it's just, you don't know what you don't know. But I spent my wheels for so long looking for things that just were not fundable because I just didn't know. And so these are the times when it's so helpful to have seasoned grant professionals in your life, that these are the things I would try on my own first, but then reach out and go, hey, I've been tasked with finding this. Thoughts? And sometimes people come back and go, yeah, that's really hard, but I do know of this one funding source. Amazing. Or sometimes they come back and say, yeah, that's actually not a fundable thing, and here's why. So now at least it's not just me, because you know how it is when you work in an organization, even though you're hired for your expertise, once you're an employee, it's like you don't know what you're talking about. But if I come in with, well, I spoke to a consultant, or I spoke with, whoever it is, and suddenly it's like, oh, well, okay, it must be true then. And I'm like, I've been telling you this for years, but it's just
now another exception.
Yeah.
Another exception before everybody's like, well, actually, because anytime you come at me with the well, actually, I'm just getting ready for some mansplaining, and it doesn't really matter what gender you are, right? It's actually is going to be a mansplaining thing, man, woman, child, whatever, doesn't matter. But if you're in a government building that is a historical building, yes, Cynthia, there may be funding. Yes, Brenda,
Yes.
There may be funding for historic preservation. So stand down. It's okay. We know there are exceptions. So That was just a musical moment brought to you by me because I care. So as Amanda said, you got to get clear on what funding streams work best for what options and be able to explain that. And if you say, well, I listened, there are these consultants that do this podcast and they were talking about this very thing. This is what they said. That could go a long way. It cracks me up because it's like, you already know, but having an outsider say something may be the way. And while there are exceptions, you're going to spend a lot of time, as Amanda said, trying to find them, those exceptions for different kinds of funding. Because I'm sure there are general operating funding, for example, could be used for those admin positions. Yes. Unless sometimes foundations say general operating, but I'm like, is it really? Because if we have to tell you exactly how we're going to spend the money on what program and how much, that is kind of like, that is kind of restricted funding, isn't it? I'm just saying, it may not be as wide open as you think. And while I'm delighted that more foundations are going toward general operating funding, as they should get rid of those crappy applications and ridiculous reporting, and let's just all work together. They should be giving out more than 5%, all these things. But by and large, the program project funding that's out there is still going to be restricted funding. Mm-hmm. And there are going to be limits on what you can spend. So getting through all of these shenanigans, that's really important work and getting to grant readiness. And so many agencies skip the step and then find themselves chasing money. Oh, look, we can do this. If we just change and serve folks in the next county, we can get this $50,000 grant. That's a lot of money. I'm not going to lie. If you gave me $50,000, I'd be like, thanks. That's a lot of money. Thanks. But it may not be a lot of money to expand a program. And then what are you going to have to do? Hire people? And then what about the other program in the other county that's going on? What you going to do with that? Then you sort of get into mission drift. And then it's like, go after this one and this one and this one and this one and this one, which happens a lot to grant writers who are just starting out. Mm-hmm. There's some knucklehead, and I use that word generously because I'm trying not to cuss because Lynn. I'm failing miserably at that. That's really not something. I'm lying. I'm just talking. So what can happen is they bring you in, and then it's like, write this, and then someone else comes in, some other department. That is a great way to burn out grant professionals. And you want to ask me how I know? Because that's some lived experience that I have. And and you may be thinking, well, I'm just a grant writer. I just sit in a corner. And I don't know why you use that old grandma voice, but do you? But you can have a little more voice than you think, and it's okay if you're introverted, because I'm introverted too. But you can educate by presenting yourself as who you truly are, which is a subject matter expert on particular grants in question and analyzing grants and understanding how grants work. It can be a little intimidating to push back, but if you're using the time-honored, time-tested blaming the funder, but funders require this. So we want to put together the best possible proposal. So they require this and they don't fund that and they just put it in writing. And I know that's so crazy, right? Yeah. But that's what they do. So explaining the need to look for program support and general operating funding and which is more likely to pop up than others. And just explaining that and the grant cycle, all of these things have to do with being really grant ready. And by really grant ready, we mean you're in a great position to get grants instead of running all over the place writing grants. We had some participant in one of our training programs, a small local nonprofit, actually right down the road from me, who was like, "Yeah, I wrote 80 grants last year and I only got one." And that was not this person's sole job. They did not have grant writer in their title. And because they were like scattershot approach. I just want to get out as many grants as possible. And I'm so glad that they got that one. But man, that was a lot of work to get out all those others. And there were other issues, and we talked through them, and she was delightful. And I think that maybe things are looking up in terms of getting that grant funding. But it's about being strategic versus when you look for individual donors, right? And you have your mailing list, or maybe you are working your Facebook page or Instagram or whatever it is that you do. Giving Tuesday, you're presenting the same message to a lot of people at the same time and inviting people. That is a time-honored approach. There are all sorts of experts out there who can help you with segmenting your audience and crafting messages, but I'm talking about the philosophy in general. It's the same message going out to many, many people as you can to get a response. And that is diametrically opposed to being ready to get grants. It's all about tailored, focused, and strategic approaches. I also respect that there are many, many strategies around individual fundraising. I'm just saying the approaches are very different. So,
yep. True.
Yeah.
Yep. So, okay. So we've covered that it's key to understand the need and what it is you need to get funding. But then another part of grant readiness is understanding who's going to help secure the grant funding. And before you say, well, obviously it's me, I'm the grant professional. This is what I was hired to do. Successful grant development requires a team effort, right? No one person can or should be held responsible for every single aspect of all the work that it takes to put together a good grant proposal. Okay. So let's talk about the who behind successful grant proposals. Who gets to decide what grants you do pursue, right? It's probably not you alone as a grant professional, just willy-nilly going, oh, this sounds fun, let's write it. It's probably leadership. It's probably input from program directors. Again, going back to step one should be identifying your needs and figuring out, and that will drive what grants you're going after. Okay. So you definitely need some sort of community within your organization that helps determine what is our focus for grant seeking. Then it's who does the writing and the research. Okay. Even though I was at several places I worked full time as an employee, even though I was the only person with grant in my title, I still had other people that were like, hey, I enjoy writing and I know a lot about my program. Can I help with things? Or, hey, I found this grant. Do you think it's a good fit? So I'm always encouraging everybody I work with. I'm like, you find a grant you think is a fit for something, send it to me because I'd rather get it 12 times than not get it at all. Do you want to write something? Absolutely, because then that's less writing I have to do. Now, I still want everything to come through kind of the grants office. So I get final editing just to make sure that everything we're sending out we're sharing all the same information and it's accurate and everything's, not that I'm the end all be all when it comes to grammar and spelling and all those things, but like you do need one person that's kind of making sure that everything you put out tells that seamless story. Because I have done grant writing by committee before, especially when I've done like big projects involving a lot of different agencies. Everybody's writing style is different, right? And it can, if no one person is coming through and kind of making it all seamless, it can seem like a very disjointed application. So yes, you can have multiple writers, but it's always a good idea to have one person that's kind of packaging that final product, right? Then think who can sign your applications, right? Probably not you as a grant professional. It probably more than likely it has to be the chair of your board as a nonprofit. Or when I was in local government, it always had to be the mayor that can sign things. Now, every now and then an executive director may be able to or something like that. But so just understanding that is all part of it. So I definitely say, and we aren't even talking about like, I always think finance should be involved because grants mean budgets. It means figuring out is a match required and where's that match coming from? And I know a budget of my organization pretty well, but it's not my budget, right? It's that department's, it's finances in charge of things. So there's just so many aspects of different folks that even if they're not per se writing the grant, their expertise and input is needed for you to be able to put together that proposal. So part of grant readiness is figuring out who's your grant team. Because one of the cities I came and started working for, they, my boss basically, he's like, we've hired you because we've had some issues with things happening willy-nilly. So we need one central person. But he's like, I am not a grant expert. And so I'm going to be deferring to you, which on one hand, it was like, scary. I have no one to turn to. But on the other hand, it was actually really nice because he truly was like, if you want to do it, I'm behind you. And so one of the first things I did was create a grants. What did I call it? I think I just call it my grants team. And we met what I had someone from finance, and then I had at least one person from every department that we met monthly to talk about what are your funding needs? What's going on? Hey, let me share this article about this city who messed up and now they're, somebody's in jail because of it, or they've lost grant funding. So when you think, man, Amanda, why are you being, so hard on this? I'm like, because I don't want y'all to go to jail. And that really helped. So you may have to form your own team. And you're, again, going back to Kimberly's, like, but I'm an introvert. Great, be an introvert.
Do by email. Do
by
by email,
email if
y'all.
you need to,
It's okay.
but
Okay.
build your team, because it's just going to make your life so much easier. Because again, you can't do it all. You just can't.
So other folks that might need to be involved, Amanda mentioned finance. You also want to decide who's doing the program implementation. And pro tip, it should not be you.
Mm-hmm.
If you are writing the grants and you are supposed to bring in more and more grants, how are you going to do that if you got to run programs? And if you're like, but Kimberly, we're at a small organization and there are only 2 employees. Fair. But
Yes.
also that can limit your capacity to search for and manage grants. So let's get that grant ready discussion going. Also, who is making purchases, who does the reporting, both financial and program outcomes, who's submitting stuff for reimbursements. And if they do, please, Lord, they need to understand the proper coding, right? Because folks who are like running programs all day, they're out in the community, they're out there getting it done, loving and working with the people or environments that they're serving, making a difference, may not be the same people who are really, really excited by coding things properly, right? They're 2 different skill sets. And getting that, who's going to do that? Who's going to come up behind and go, oh, because you didn't put the extra code on this one, it didn't get over to this grant. Who's going to be doing all of that? Who's tracking expendables and receivables? Now, for larger organizations, you got someone, but I'm just saying. And prepares for the auditors. So in larger organizations, you may have people with those job titles, right? You may have folks from finance working together. You've got your senior leadership team. You've got your executive director, your CEO, your COO, EIEIO. I'm not judging your job titles, although some of them are ridiculous. So that is a judgment, isn't it? Then for that setting the priorities team, right? Point a team. I love calling it a team or task force and not a committee because no one wants to be on a committee. They just don't. It's the word, it's the implication. Then for the grant narrative itself, the actual grant, not the setting the priorities, getting our budget together, kind of who's doing what that we just talked about, but the actual grant itself. Then maybe you'll need a program person who's a subject matter expert. You need somebody writing that grant. You're still going to need somebody from finance who's going to be your buddy and making sure the project budget makes sense so that the finance person and the program person, the program person's like, we need all these things. The finance person's like, we have some of these things and it costs this much. And let everybody come together. We have the chocolate with the peanut butter, make a little Reese's cup of goodness. And that is your grant, right? You just, also, it's super helpful to go ahead and set up, as Amanda said, folks to look at your grant, but choose wisely.
Yes.
And be clear about your expectations. Because I'm kind of like, at this point in my career, I want reviews really hyper-focused first around content as a consultant. Because I've got remote clients all over the place. So it's like, did I capture this accurately? Is this really what it does? Because I will make sure that I keep everything in order and stuff matches up. And I'm not such a bad writer, so I'm cool with that. But I want you to also proof it. I am usually, because I've been doing this for a while, if I have someone who is like, oh, I'm also a writer too, and I would love to come in and wordsmith, I'm like, gosh, thanks so much. And I actually might look for someone else. And it's not because I'm always right. It's because I'm really concerned about the content being accurate. And I don't really want to get into a debate on whether or not there's just a difference between reading for content and proofreading and then copy editing where they want to make it better by adding lots of words. Because I get really peeved by that. If I have a character count of like 1,000, including spaces, I do not need folks to, I don't need to spin my wheels going, yes, that is a great turn of phrase and that is a marvelous story. And now we have to cut everything in half to fit it in. So you choose. So I try in a really compassionate way to choose the team or help people choose their teams so that that doesn't happen, so that you don't get someone who really just likes to tinker with stuff. I know you've been in board meetings where people are tinkering with stuff, and I'm trying really hard not to say anything else other than stuff. And I'm like, you can tinker with stuff, or you could get out and raise more money, which is easier, tinkering with other people's stuff. So all that to say, so we've talked a little bit about who you need overall to set the priorities, who you need to help put the grant together. And I think, Amanda, you have some other advice that I may have covered already. So feel free to do what it is you need to do.
Yeah. One thing I will say too, you were talking about, speaking to your subject matter experts and everything. I have, for the most part, I've been very lucky. Every program staff, whether it's a stormwater engineer or a police officer who knows all about DUI enforcement, I've been very fortunate to have people that can explain to me who, while I'm, an intelligent human being, I'm not an expert in any of those things. I am certainly not an engineer, but they have been able to share their knowledge in a way that I'm able to understand so I can write it. But there have been a handful of times where I've worked with someone who they're just so technical that they can't get off of that, or just the way they talk in circles. There have been a handful of times I've had to go to maybe a director of a department going, hey, I know you paired me with this person. We have met 3 times and I've taken so many notes, but I still don't understand the program or the problem or whatever it is that I just can't wrap my mind around. And I'm like, I'm going to need some sort of translator here. Right. And so don't be afraid if you're like, I'm not doing my job right, I don't understand. It's okay, because it's just everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. And some people are really good at taking complex information and making it so the average person can understand, but not everybody is. And you have to call in a translator. So don't be, don't
May
be.
have to call in a translator, and you may start to understand that that is a big part of a grant development or grant professional's job, is to take complex information and break it down. And so if you're new, it's a skill set, and you can develop it, and you can ask for people to explain things in different ways. And there's so many other resources. I usually ask people, I'm like, send me everything you think I ought to read. And they're like, oh, I don't want to overwhelm you. And I'm like, I read like it's my damn job. I don't say that to them, but I read a lot. Ever since I was a little girl, all sorts of things, and I'm really fast at it. It is one of my strengths. So I'm like, you just send your little reports and whatnot, and let me go through everything. And sometimes that can go a long way, because maybe people who are technical experts are really good with written communication and not so good with verbal. Or you can just get the background, and then you're able to have.
You can ask better questions that way too.
Yeah.
Yep. So back to your grant team. So Kimberly did a great job talking about just kind of programmatic in general and your writing team. We are going to talk a little bit about grant management, because even though I never want to only talk about writing, because the process does not end when you hit submit.
No.
If you get that grant, you've actually got to do all the things and do it well and spend the money correctly so you can get the next grant, right? So if you are thinking about like, what's my team that's going to help with budget development and grant management and procurement, having folks from finance. There was somebody I had assigned that was an accountant, that she handled all the grant accounting. She did other accounting stuff too, but she was my go-to, and she was a wealth of knowledge. It could be, the CFO or the finance director, or again, an accountant. Also, you need your program and project managers. Like Kimberly says, somebody else is probably managing the program. And so they need to be part of the team, because you're going to have to be submitting reports. And part of that reports is, did you do all these things? And how many people did you serve and all that? You may have a development director and the grant writer and direct service providers. They're just, it's a plethora of people that it takes to come together to make sure you're implementing your programs and following all the grant rules and regulations, which can vary, right? I have had a grant from Target where literally they handed us a check and we're like, peace out. We never heard from them again. They didn't want anything from us. To I've managed many a federal grant that had so many hoops and reports and requirements and things that you had to do. So, and then everything, of course, is going to be somewhere in between the two. So you want to have a team that handles that side of the equation as well.
You do, and I also want to take a minute to say when we say teams, sometimes they're actually meeting in person. Sometimes that can be a part as a development director, my grants team. I included questions in our weekly directors meeting, like some top level questions, or if there were bottlenecks, we discussed it there. It was a part of an agenda, so it could be a face-to-face meeting, or it could be maybe a kickoff meeting and then everybody understanding that the rest of it's going to be done by email, or it can be a series of Zoom calls, whatever it needs to be. And also, I just wanted to bring up, we've gone through, talking about specific, you want someone from accounting, you want this, you want that. If you're a smaller agency, right, you're going to have one person doing 5 of these things that we just talked about. So Amanda, what would you want people to know about that?
You still need to figure out what are all the things that need to be done. And your grant team may be whoever's the grant writer, a program person, and maybe the bookkeeper that's a consultant, or maybe it's a finance or a board member who's the treasurer. You're just looking around and figuring out who has the skills and resources to cover all of these things. And so your team may be a team of 2 or 3, and it is what it is, right? So you make it work. So,
Yeah.
well, let's move on real quick. We want to talk for a couple of minutes, and I know we've been talking a lot because there's so much to say about grant readiness, but being grant ready goes beyond just the application process, and it takes more than caffeine, although caffeine is your friend. So, so it's more than that.
You're almost like you're pulling together a community. I think if that's the take home for me, you're pulling together a community. You're educating people about how grant writing really works in the real world, defining priorities, and pulling together a team so that everybody understands their part in the process, because they all have a part in the process, because grant writing is not a solo sport.
Yep. So let's talk about documentation, because that is part of grant readiness as well, is getting all of your ducks in a row. And so you really need, we're not going to go through every piece of document you need, but what I do want to say is as you are finding information or as you're working on proposals and realizing, hey, they so often ask for a copy of a 501c3 letter, or they're always asking for a board list, or they're always asking, these are the kinds of documents that you're probably going to be submitting to funders over and over and over and over again. So you want to create kind of that one-stop shop repository where you're collecting all of that. I don't want to have to figure out, let's see, the last time I did an org chart, it was for that grant in 2024, and I think it was from the Day Foundation. Let me go see if I can find it in that folder. No, I want a folder. And I do this, when I was managing multiple clients, I had a folder for each client, and then inside of each of that folder, I had a folder, and I'm talking electronic. I had a folder that was basically like important documents, for lack of a, whatever you want to call it. And that's where I kept a copy of all of those documents that, that year's budget. If we had created some goals and objectives for programming for each different program for the year, I've got that, all of my outcomes. I have one client that every year they track how many clients did they serve? What was their racial and age breakdown? How many volunteers did they have? How many hours of volunteer service? How many, it was a clinic. So how many, x-rays that they did, and how many, what percentage of their patients were diabetic, all of these, just numbers. And so every year they put together this lovely sheet. Guess what? That lived in my important document. So anytime I needed that information, it's so easy to find. And so however you're doing, I'm not saying there's one right way. If you're using Google or Dropbox or just a file on your computer, whatever it is, you need that repository that you are having a collection of things and you're updating it as needed, right? Because your budget's only going to be good for the year. So next year you've got to update it.
there are also other things that you would, I'm just gonna bullet point this one out. Org charts, monthly financial statements,
Yes.
C3 letters, your org budget, your overall budget, right? And it should just be on one page. Don't be, that's a great time to work with your accounting buddy and go, yeah, we need that budget summary, operating budget summary for the next fiscal year. One page. And also go ahead and collect any planning documents. Sometimes they're called strategic planning documents, master plans or comprehensive plans. If they are current, go ahead and get them in there and have that in your library. What are some other things you want folks to collect?
Yeah, we talked about your board member list or occasionally your council list if you're an elected official. Photos and videos of your work, they don't always ask for that, but sometimes funders do. And it's so nice to have it versus going, this grant's due in 2 weeks and we need a video. And how are we going to make this? So if you already have some things, having, evaluations you've done, surveys, audits, your Form 990. And again, it's just think about it. Anytime maps, just anytime I would create something that I thought, you know what, I could actually use this for another application, I would just throw it in that file. And if I used it, great. If I didn't, no harm, no foul. But I'd rather have it than not have it. So
it's been a lot of information, but this is we're as a part of Fundraising HayDay, we're committed to doing how-tos sprinkled in throughout the year amongst our ravings and our fantastic guest interviews. So we hope you're feeling more grant ready, or you're planning some steps to get you there, but more importantly, your organization or your client there through some gentle education.
Absolutely. So grant readiness, being successful in grants is not just about I've written a good proposal. To be able to write a good proposal, there's so much you have to do, putting that team together, understanding the cycle, all the things. So grant readiness really should be priority number one. Thanks again to today's sponsor, Kim Joyce & Associates. If you want to learn more about their many service offerings, visit kimjoyceandassociates.com. That's KIMJOYCE and associates.com.
So again, thanks for joining us today. We hope you're feeling more grant ready, or you're planning steps to get there.
We're so honored you chose to spend time with us today. We're going to see you in 2 weeks where we have a fantastic interview with Dr. Brandy Ray Hicks. She is discussing everything from working with celebrities in philanthropy to trends in grant funding and so much more. We'll see you then, friends.
Bye.